Welcome to Troweling Down, Biblical Archaeology for the 21st Century. Hi, I'm Gary Byers. This is Dr. Carroll Kobs. We're assistant directors at the El-Hammam Excavation, where we are right now. And we're going to talk to you about what we have found at this site. Carol, we've been gone for
3 years. It's so great to be back on the Tell.
And when we got back after being gone 3 years, what did you think of what was here?
This is so well preserved. We were expecting night digger holes, lots of overgrowth, and what we found was really just some minor cleanup and a few surprises, but nothing we couldn't handle. So all in all, she fared well.
It really has done well, and we're finishing our first week of excavation.
Very exciting.
And so at the moment, we're not going to talk about new stuff, but we just want to point out what we've got here at El-Hammam. Now, we're on the acropolis. So here's where we think the king's palace was in the Middle Bronze Age, and we think we're digging part of it down there. Yeah. And then also just behind us, not exactly this wall, but just behind us, we think was a governor's residency for the Iron Age people here, and that was probably destroyed in the 8th century, something like that. But this wall's later than that, but it's got a cool story. You want to tell us?
It really is neat. So this is the latest occupation. We have so many strata, which are different occupational layers, and this is our latest one. So this is the most recent occupation at El-Hammam on the Upper Tall, and this actually dates to the Herodian, the Roman time period. And it's really interesting because Nelson Gleck, when he came here in the 1800s, really perused our site up here, and he noted in his work this tower, only he documented it as Iron Age. Of course, he didn't excavate and have the pottery, and we have, and so now we know that it clearly dates to the later Herodian period. And what's interesting is what Lane Rittmeyer, our architect, reconstructionalist, archaeologist, or whatever, archaeological architect, that's it, told us about the smoke signals. Do you want to talk about that, Gary?
So what we understand, first off, as Carol pointed out, this is the kind of architecture when King Herod wasn't using his great big stones, which he did a lot of, during his time period. Well, he never saw this stuff, but this is the kind of architecture. They had these rows of thick, big stones and then rows of little stones coming down through it. So, and you actually can find the same kind of thing at Masada. They have the same architecture. So what we understand was this was one of those signal towers. Now, what kind of signals did they use?
They use fire for signals, and so it could go all the way from Jerusalem or one of his other palace towers, fortress towers, over the river in Israel, and go all the way to Mesopotamia, and they could do a quick contact of an enemy attacking or coming, or just kind of news, something to be aware of in a matter of really hours, just hours, and it would go all the way to Mesopotamia.
And so not smoke signals, but fire signals. They do them at night. Yeah. And we think we could probably see one from the Mount of Olives, but if not from there, from one of the towers to the east. And then we could get it here, and then our smoke signal, our fire signal, would send it up the river and eventually all the way over to Mesopotamia. It's amazing, and they chased the new moon for the beginning of each month, and it started with the priests in Jerusalem. So they knew roughly this should be the day. So everybody's looking, everybody's waiting, and as soon as they saw it, signal fire went up, and then just so quickly all the way Mesopotamia, all the way to Babylon. So this is our Herodian tower at El-Hammam. Not a lot of Herodian stuff still standing. But we got this part right here.
I think we found the Herodian objects that we found. We had one really nice lamp that was found in the early seasons. And what's interesting about this wall right here, this actual tower, is that the foundations of it cut or were built deep into an earlier occupational layer, which is a stratum of the Iron Age. And that wall you can see here, and it actually cuts into that Iron Age wall.
Okay, so we've moved actually just a few yards away from where we were, and here we are in the Iron Age Palace. Carol, we called it the Red Palace. How's come?
We called it the Red Palace a long time ago because of the brick color. And the brick color actually, ancient mud bricks were actually yellow color and soil with a consistency, but now they're red, as you see here, because of a heavy destruction of fire. So they're actually burnt mud bricks. So Gary has a sample of one of the almost entire mud bricks that we found in this so-called Red Palace, which really isn't a palace as of yet that we know for sure. But this is actually the first phase of the Iron Age occupation that we have on the Tall. And this Iron Age stratigraphy and room right here that we're in, and this mud brick and these walls coincided with the Iron Age gate. And we'll run that in another segment and show you the Iron Age gateway on the upper Tall. And so this was built along with that. And then we also have a second phase. But before we move to the second phase, which are the actual storerooms, these walls are just fantastic. You can actually see the mud bricks. You can see the seams in them. The mud plaster is still adhering. And Gary, what date would the Iron Age? This would be...
We're making this is the last phase of the city that was destroyed. So sometime in the late 8th century, this is when we lost this city, and Tal El-Hammam pretty much went offline for hundreds of years, till, as Carol mentioned, the Roman period, and then some Byzantine and then some Islamic stuff later on. So you saw the size of this brick, and Danny showed you these bricks. These are not the size of the bricks in our houses in the U.S. or most of Europe today. These are big bricks, and this one happened to be severely burned and with a lot of gray ash in it. So this is where one of the rooms. I'm in one room. Carol's actually in the next room.
There's the doorway right here. You see the wall that separates, and the doorway opening here into another room. And in this back room where I'm standing was just an intense ash layer where we pulled out a lot of actual burnt timbers intact, and of course they deteriorated over time, but we're doing sampling on those and some of our objects. So we've got a good clear indication of the 8th century here.
Behind us are the storerooms. This room, what do you suppose, Carol? Was this actually part of the palace proper or part of the storeroom area, do you suppose?
I think this actually was part of the palace or governor's palace during the Iron Age, and the storerooms actually then were built on. We don't know the time frame between the two and how quickly the storerooms were added on, but we've got what the storerooms tell us, and we'll take you to earlier silos. The agricultural industry here was just phenomenal.
And apparently it was a store city to collect stuff. But when we excavated these storerooms, there was virtually nothing left. Whatever was destroyed, whoever did it, and we think maybe the Arameans, maybe old Haziel of the Aramean cities, whoever it was, when they took this city over and destroyed it, they left nothing of value. A disappointment to archaeologists, but it's the reality of the ancient world.
Right, and what's interesting too about that is, in the Assyrian annals, they say that they actually came down and conquered the southern border of Gilead, and this would have been possibly the southern boundary of Gilead. We found no indication of Assyrians, but the Arameans, like you said, Gary, did come down and conquer this, probably in this vicinity. So likely it was the Aramean conquest here.
So now we're in the storerooms of the palace, and this is, we're in one here. There were stone foundations and then mud brick walls on top, and even stone built and then mud brick covered, plastered benches. And on the benches is generally where they would have stored all their grain in jars or whatever they had. And we found absolutely nothing. How many storerooms did we have here, Carol, when we excavated them?
So we had a row of 4 across this way, but then we had a southern row that was actually cut off from some of the modern military, and when I say modern, like the early 70s, who cut into some of our architecture here. So there would have been about 8 to 10 long storage rooms, and Gary, these were 6 meters long. So they were very consistent and all in a row, and like you said, amazingly, there was hardly any pottery. All we found were just a few sherds and really nothing to find evidence of occupation. And it's almost like either the people here heard about the Arameans coming and they fled with all their things, or they were captured and just gave up and surrendered and took all their food with them for the journey back up to Aramean.
And however it happened, they clearly destroyed this place.
Right.
It was burnt to a crisp. Right. And as Carol pointed out, some of the mud brick on the walls there. So this is the way it was as those days. Yeah. And now we're going to go one last visit today, and we want to take you to one of the silos from the very earliest Iron Age period. Okay, now we've moved about 30 yards from where we were at the Roman period tower, and then we went into the residency palace area, and then we went to the storerooms. Now we're down about 30 or 40 feet, and we're about 30 or 40 yards from where we were before. And what do we call this, Carol?
This is so neat to be standing in an ancient silo that's stone lined. It's for storage purposes, probably grain. Not only is it stone lined, but it also is plastered. And this is the mud plastering that you saw before on the walls, and the floor is all cobbled. And this is just so exciting. This is our earliest stratum for the Iron Age. This is our stratum 10 at El-Hammam. And we find these silos not only on the upper tall, but we found them on the lower tall as well. Isn't that correct?
Now, Carol, you grew up in Texas. You know what silos are. They're round like this, but they go above ground. What's the deal with them being underground? Right.
Well, that's for the rodents and all this, and also they were actually dug into the earlier stratigraphy of things, and so they would have been lower than the ground level, but damaging the earlier architecture
But it did help them keep things stored well
and safe.
Yes, so it was a good idea. Didn't build silos up, still round, but took them down into the ground lined with stone. So this one would have been filled with jars. Around here, it wasn't so much wheat, but instead
it was barley. And wouldn't you say?
Yes.
And we have found jars with barley remains in there.
Apparently the soil in this area, at least in the days of the Iron Age people, that was not good for wheat, but it worked okay for barley.
Very fertile for the barley.
Good for animals. Right. Not so good for people, but actually the Bible talks about Jesus with barley bread. So you can eat barley bread if you were hungry enough, and you'll take what you can get. Gives you your calories and keeps you going through the day. This is about the largest silo we have on the site, And it's one of our favorites, and we love to come down here and just realize, kind of shut off from the rest of the world for a minute. Here we are at ancient El-Hammam. We're in the Iron Age, the time of the Israelites and across the river. And this is troweling down biblical archaeology for the 21st century. And we're down about as low as you can go these days, Carol.
And there's about 12 or 13 silos that we've discovered. Not all this big. As Gary said, this is the largest, and it's still standing.
Right here, El-Hammam.